Town of Westford Select Board meeting of Tuesday, January 23rd. This meeting is recorded, and we will start with the pledge as we always do. And today, let's have it led by John.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good, thank you, John. We will start off with a number of open forum items, after which we'll welcome anyone from the public that has an announcement to make. And first up is to recognize Ronald Palaskis, who's retiring from this department. Chief, please.
Thank you very much. I would just like to say I always appreciate the whether it's civilian or sworn officers. I think it goes to show how much respect that we have for our long-term employees. So, and Ron is one of our longer-serving employees. He's been on the employment with the town of Westford for over 32 years. Ron came to the department as a military veteran after serving 4 years in the United States Air Force as a security police officer. And in 1992, he began his career at the Westford Police Department as an auxiliary officer before he became a dispatcher in November of 1993. Ron didn't get hired for a few years. He finally got hired as a full-time officer in 1996. And he really has had a pretty great career in law enforcement after he was hired. Went to the same police academy as me at the Lowell Police Academy. We all ran our half marathons to be able to graduate, which was always a pleasure. But in his 28 years with full-time service with the town of Westford, he really has done a lot of different things. He's held a lot of different positions and had a lot of various responsibilities. So in addition to his work as a patrol officer, he was a detective. He did come out of detective to be one of our first traffic officers. And as a traffic officer, one of his focuses was OUI, driving while under the influence enforcement, for which he was actually recognized as Westford's Officer of the Year in 2000 for his work enforcing the operating under influence laws. So after that, Ron did receive a letter of accommodation again in 2000 for locating a vehicle that was wanted in connection with an armed home invasion in a neighboring community that led to the arrest of 2 individuals. In 2001, Ron was promoted to sergeant and began serving the Westford Police Department as a supervisor. And he did continue in his leadership roles, both with the ranks of lieutenant, then captain, and finally deputy chief in 2021. Ron was promoted to deputy chief at the same time that I made chief. And I will say personally, he has been a joy to work with. Everything that I've asked him to do, he's done with professionalism, pride, and thoroughness that I really couldn't have asked for anybody else to step in and take that role and do a better job with it. So I've been blessed to have him as my deputy chief. So with that, Deputy Palaskis has the sincere appreciation and respect to the Westford Police Department and the other law enforcement agencies in our area and around the Commonwealth. We've heard from many of them over the past several weeks once word of his upcoming retirement got out, which is always great for our guys to hear. And we applaud him for his years of service and all of his many accomplishments, and we wish him well in his upcoming retirement. His last day will be Friday. His retirement goes into effect at Saturday night at midnight, 11:59. We will be hosting a little get-together at the PD in our Emergency Operations Center starting at about 1:30. So feel free to come by, have a snack. We'll have some coffee, some cake, some cookies, just to kind of get the band back together. We just recently had one about a month ago. It was very well attended and very much appreciated by the officers. Some of our retired officers come by to say, good luck in retirement as well. We also will be having our quick promotional ceremony after that as well, to allow our officers to receive their new badges and pins as all the promotions filter down. So hopefully see you there.
Yeah, 1:30 on Friday.
1:30 on Friday.
Okay, thank you so much, Chief. And with a lot of gratitude, any comments about celebrating Ron? You look like you're about to say something, John.
Oh, wow.
No, just so excited.
I'll
Chris?
I'll say something. So as chair of the Pedestrian Safety Committee, the committee worked for probably a year and a half deliberating on whether or not the town should adopt 17C, the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. And Ron was assigned, I don't know willingly or not, to help the committee with our research, and he just was an awesome partner. The amount of time and effort he put into it astounded me. Always willing to answer questions, come to meetings. He went out of his way to talk to different resources in the state to understand the nuances, and there was a lot of nuances about that. And so that was just my one example working with him, and it was extremely gratifying, and I think he probably brought that professionalism to everything he did, like you mentioned, Chief, and he'll be missed, so.
Great, and we're so lucky always to have such long service, as Chief mentioned.
John does have something.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. Oh, now, okay, now you're right.
Yeah, well, I worked with Chief Pulaski at the active shooter drill over
Okay.
at the high school and stuff. Superb job, you know. And he really showed his Air Force training. No, great guy, and just always personable, always, you know, he just had it all. We'll miss him.
To add to Chris, so Ron worked with the two most difficult town citizens, Chris and I, because on pedestrian safety it was, but we really want to. Yeah, but just think about, but we really, really want to. But yeah, so I give him credit for, again, the freshness to say no politely, or it's not a good idea politely, without saying no. So yeah, it was. He could be a diplomat. Future Craig could be a diplomat. We could
Right.
use him in the foreign service. So.
I'll let him know.
Second career.
Second career, right.
Yeah.
And welcome, Andrea. We also are going to celebrate another long-serving town team member, Carol McCann.
So I don't see anyone on the line from the library at this point in time, but we'd just like to recognize Carol McCann, who is retiring from the library after 23 years of service. So thank you for her time and service with the town of Westford.
And at a future time, if we have Ellen here, we may ask her to make a comment at that time. But again, incredibly lucky to have people who are willing to give their career to the town of Westford over such a long period of time. So thank you. And Kristen, it looks like we've got a couple more here before we welcome the public.
Yes, absolutely. So we just want to remind residents that if they have not already received, they will be receiving a vote by mail postcard. This is for the 3 state or nationwide elections that vote by mail will be available. Vote by mail is not available for the local election that will be held on May 7th. So just want to remind residents that. There's also, I'll just couple it with the next one further down. We will have early voting for the primary. The primary is March 5th, so you're more than welcome to come out and vote at your precinct on March 5th. But Saturday, February 24th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and Monday, February 26th through March 1st, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. That will be, I believe, at the EOC in the police station. We'll be getting more information out to the residents. And I believe there's more information in the town manager newsletter on that. So we'll have 4 elections in the town of Westford for 2024.
Busy times for our new town clerk. Also, it was raised to our attention, and we always like to celebrate exciting things that are happening in Westford, that Westford Academy senior Jack Whitman achieved a perfect score on his AP exam. So that's different if you're familiar with the AP exam. That's different than getting a 5. Getting a 5 is an amazing achievement. But he actually got a perfect score, got every question right. So congratulations to Jack for that. And I think that came to our attention in an article that also celebrated his cross-country skiing expertise. Nordic skiing. So nice to have a multi-talented young people out there doing amazing things here in Westford.
I thought this was an amazing feat since I was on the edge of being dismissed from my freshman chemistry class. But anyway, he's done a lot. I mean, he's a full. Well, he's got triathlon, marathon, the running, the athletics. He also does some work in the community. And that's what just impressed me about that. Is just he's a good all-around guy, athlete, academic, everything.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks, John, for raising that to our attention. And we'd love to celebrate accomplishments in the community. So if you have any, please send them to us. We'd love to spend a minute thanking them and celebrating. Any other open forum items tonight from the public?
I have 2 more that are not on the agenda. I would like to remind the public that there will be a Lunar New Year celebration on Saturday, February 10th at 4:30 p.m. at Westford Academy. There are tickets available to this event. I don't have the link off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you Google Westford Lunar New Year celebration, you'll be able to find that. And would just like to remind the public that myself, Dr. Chu, Chairman Clay, Chairperson Young of the school committee and others will be at the League of Women Voters event tomorrow evening and at the Senior Center on Friday to discuss the intricacies of the fiscal 25 budget. We'll obviously be discussing a lot of that this evening, but it will be more of an informal get-together. We'll be able to answer questions. So looking forward to those two events. And as the other events come up, we'll certainly make those available. They are linked off the budget website. That is a new link on our town website, linked off the homepage at the very top.
And that league's meeting is where?
I'm sorry, it is at WCAT tomorrow evening. It will not be televised, it's just a live event. And the Senior Center event is at the Cameron on Friday, again, not televised, but a live event.
And to get to WestfordCAT, it's on Groton Road, Route 40, and you can Google WestfordCAT, Westford Community Access Television, you'll get the address. I don't know it offhand, but you would be most welcome. There's plenty of room there. So thank you for that. And was that two?
That was two.
That was two, okay, great. Anything from the public tonight for open forum? And I was asked earlier if we would have opportunities for comment later, please welcome. If you do have a comment later that relates to a later agenda item, you're also welcome to speak then. You'll have an opportunity. We'll also recognize the public at those times too. Please, welcome.
Hi, my name is Megan O'Connell from 44 South Chelmsford Road. I'll be brief, I hope. I have sent an email to everyone on the select board several weeks ago talking about a residential exemption, which is part of the packet for tonight's meeting. So thank you for including it in the packet. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I just want to highlight a few things for anyone that might be watching. Again, I bring this up because with the potential Prop 2.5 override of roughly $7.5 million, we're looking at an increase for an average residential home of $700,000 of over $700 per year in taxes. Now, from a number of documents issued by the town, I have one here from September 2022, the Westford Housing Production Plan. And here it talks about how median household income, when adjusted for inflation, has actually decreased in Westford 4.1% from the period 1999 to 2015 through 19. Similar, inflation-adjusted per capita income has decreased 4.0%. In that same report, it talks about how 25% of owner-occupied households in Westford are already considered at least moderately burdened by their housing costs, paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. Now, I understand we do have some programs currently available for real estate tax relief, but they're limited to seniors or those at poverty level incomes. But there are a number of families, especially after these last 2 years of high inflation, that really need relief, but it's not available under the current programs. So again, without going into everything that I included in the email, I would strongly urge the board, if at the end of these budget hearings in the next few weeks, the decision of the board is to move forward with a vote on a Prop 2.5 override, I would strongly urge the board to either discuss and debate amongst yourselves or reconvene the budget task force to consider the pros and cons of a residential exemption. It's the last thing we should be doing as a town, especially as a board, is making significant financial decisions that are going to put people in a position where they have to move out of town. I don't think that's what equity is about. We should be looking at how we can keep the current residents here. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent point and well spoken. We were just talking about when we would put on the agenda a review of the various relief and support programs that are available in town, and also discuss the residential exemption as an option. And I think we agreed we would do that in our next meeting.
Yes.
Okay, so that'll be on our next agenda, and we'll have information on the packet that'll help people prepare on what programs we have, what programs might be available, and kind of what the rules governing them are. So thank you for that. Okay, anything else from the public? We will move on to our 7:05 consent agenda, which includes requests to approve the following. First, a special license. The event is the Westford's Fun Farm. The applicant is Sandra Habe. The date is Saturday, February 10th, and the time is 2 to 6 p.m. Location is Good Pick and Form at 5 Gould Road. Also, a request for the Town Common and Bandstand. The event is a marriage. Congratulations. The applicant is Beth Perkins. The date is June 1st, 2024, time is 2 to 6 p.m. And those are the two requests we have this evening. Any questions, and if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Okay.
Second.
Okay, and since we have Andrea Mutt, we'll do a voice vote. So all in favor, Andrea?
Yes.
Scott?
Aye.
John? Chris?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Okay, next up is Kristen to help us move through, to review and act to authorize the town manager to sign a contract with the L. Harvey to begin solid waste pickup beginning February 5th, 2024 through June 30th, 2024, obviously much earlier than we had expected. Kristen?
Sure, thank you, board members. The town of Westford currently has a contract with Acme Waste for solid waste pickup through June 30th of 2024. I just want to remind the board and the public, we also have a contract with Waste Management to pick up recycling through June 30th, 2024. Due to matters beyond our control, Acme Waste has informed us verbally that they will no longer be able to pick up solid waste within the town of Westford after February 2nd. Moving quickly after I heard that news, we went to EL Harvey to see if they would be available to provide solid waste collection, as they will be the incoming contractor for both solid waste and recycling as of July 1st, 2024. EL Harvey is very willing to do that. They've offered a proposal for that. Their proposal is quite a bit higher than what we are paying for Acme. They lead that to the quick ramp-up time. They will be renting vehicles because the vehicles they have available for Westford will not be available till closer to July 1st. And really, they're going to be a step-in opportunity. So in order to not have a gap in solid waste collection in the best interest of the town, I'm bringing a proposal before you this evening to allow for EL Harvey to provide solid waste pickup for the town of Westford February 5th through June 30th, 2024. This will be at a rate of $140,000 per month. For context and true transparency, we're currently paying about $65,000 a month with Acme Waste. We know that that is quite low compared to the market, especially based upon the bids that we received for fiscal 25 and beyond. In my memo, I did note that a transfer of funds would likely be necessary at town meeting. After reviewing the Acme contract with legal counsel, there may be some other opportunities through that contract that we are definitely going to pursue. So hopefully I can have some good news for the board at the next meeting related to that contract language. But I don't want to speak to it now as it's in process, and I don't want to negate the process. But in order for Harvey to get started on February 5th, I'd be asking for the board to authorize me to sign this 5-month contract.
So thank you for preparing this. I think it's very clear. And I apologize for not asking this earlier, but do you know offhand about how much a premium Harvey's asking for this period versus what the steady state agreement will be after we move into the full contract with them?
Yes, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong because he has the information. I believe that the first year for Harvey is $145,000 a month for both solid waste and recycling.
Okay.
Do you have the full number for solid waste, or are we just splitting that?
It's one contract,
One
so
contract,
it's
so-
1.7 million.
Okay, so difficult to know precisely, but it's a significant upcharge. And
It is.
okay. Questions from the board? Chris?
Yeah, sorry, so this handles recycling and waste, or recycling?
No, just waste.
still be-
Recycling is still with
Okay.
Waste Management until June 30th of 2023.
And like, how soon before we resolve the issues with the contract?
So I was on the phone with legal today, and I do have a meeting tomorrow with Acme Waste. So I would hope that it's a week out or so.
So we would have one, we would tonight approve, presumably, we don't have much choice, but to approve new pickup, and the next week we would have perhaps some discussion about, or 2 weeks discussion about what that settlement looks like,
Correct.
which would then offset the need for a transfer.
Correct. And we do have available funds through at least the end of March for solid waste and recycling. So we would not have a deficit in the next 2 months.
Okay.
And also, if the board decides to sign this, to allow me to sign this contract tonight, I already have our admin staff preparing press releases and social media and news flashes so that members of the public would know that Acme Waste will no longer be picking up their waste, and it will be, we're trying to get what the vehicles will look like from Harvey so we can have that information for the residents.
Any other, John?
The contract you want to sign, is that going to cover us through the rest of the year or just the 2 months until we get approval?
It just covers the 5 months,
Okay.
February through June 30th. I understand probably your concern about available funds. We would remedy it through either the Acme contract or through a town meeting vote. And the contract always says available funds. So we have that provision in our contract.
Okay, because it looks like the Acme contract would cover them for the first couple of months, at least past annual town meeting. I mean,
Yes,
remaining in the contract.
remaining,
I was
yes.
just concerned about signing a contract that commits us for the next 3 months. We got to do it, but without the funds being appropriated.
The contract is contingent upon appropriated funds.
Right, thanks.
Yep, Chris?
Will this new provider be following the same routes and schedules as the current one, so people don't
Yes.
have to worry about
Their
trash
days of the
being
week will stay
changed
the
on
same.
different days
Yes,
and
the,
times?
I'm meeting with Harvey tomorrow if the meeting is set up, if the board authorizes me to sign. We will go over all of that tomorrow. The times may change, so again, we will include all of that in a press release of what the residents can expect, but the days of the week will stay the same.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you for acting quickly so that their residents don't have a gap in coverage. And it's an unfortunate situation, but as you say, I'm not sure we have too much choice. If there are no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to authorize town manager to sign a contract with E.L. Harvey to begin solid waste pickup beginning February 5th, 2024 through June 30, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Chris?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Andrea?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
I'm also an aye.
Great, and dovetailing, you also have a matter on correspondence from the Recycling Commission on enhancements or restrictions in solid waste. We can certainly have that conversation at a future meeting, so that is not necessarily tied to this contract this evening.
Okay, so thank you for acting quickly on that unfortunate situation. Next up, we wanted to review and discuss where the budget process is. And so Kristen and Dan have prepared a little summary and a little broader view of where we are.
So Dan's bringing up the slides. Many of you have seen a portion of these slides, but a lot of the slides are new this evening. For those of you watching, we just uploaded them to the packet about an hour ago. So you did not miss it if you went through the packet already, but it is there for the members of the public. So next slide, Dan. We just want to make sure that at every meeting where we're talking about the fiscal 25 budget, we're talking about the budget challenges that we have identified through the budget task force work, that we're seeing inflation at a generational high following a period of very low inflation. We're seeing large energy, service, and labor contracts that are increasing mainly due to that inflation. We have a need to maintain competitive pay and a commitment to that, in which we benchmark ourselves both in the school and the town against comparable communities and target the average level of pay within that benchmark group. We have rapidly growing health insurance expenses. This is primarily due to our experience and the health of our employees and their dependents and their needed care. We have identified some new revenue opportunities, but those are limited and will take time. They could be from MBTA multifamily zoning. They could be from contract work that we're trying to bring on board, an economic development consultant, and there are others. But the Proposition 2.5 constraints put on us by the state that has been in place since the early 1980s really constrain us related to these service cuts. We just have a link here to the Budget Task Force report for anyone who has not been able to access that. This slide has been shown many, many times as well. This is a visual slide that shows where our fiscal 24 budget is at on the far left-hand side. And then the various contracts that we're seeing expenses increase for fiscal 25 related to solid waste and recycling, electricity, natural gas, our non-union salaries. We have town labor contracts that are increasing, school labor contracts, health insurance trust contributions, a school bus contract, special education tuition, and other increases that we've identified through budget challenges. So all in all, we're seeing about a $10 million increase from the fiscal 24 baseline budget to fiscal 25. The Budget Task Force, myself, and now the Select Board are really in earnest reviewing the efficiencies and potential revenue that were presented in that report. We are actively moving forward to a July 1st fleet fueling centralization at the DPW garage. There will be about a $40,000 savings. The other items that I am noting here do not necessarily have dollar amounts associated with them, as we're in the early stages of identifying the efficiencies, such as centralized fleet maintenance, comparing our fee structures. Most recently, health and ambulance did raise their rates. Looking at composting opportunities to reduce solid waste tonnage. I know Andrea announced at the last meeting that she is taking advantage of that. Hopefully some other residents can as well. We have the MBTA zoning that will be on the March town meeting. They started their public hearings last evening with the planning board. We're looking at integrating technology we currently own and how we can use that better, or getting rid of technology that we don't use. We're looking at shared service agreements, both internal, town and school, and external with other municipalities, and certainly continuing to monitor and examine our health insurance opportunities and our experience in that. And again, this is a slide that comes up over and over again, but we still see a lot of variables to our budget for fiscal 25 and beyond. State and federal aid, the state budget is scheduled to come out tomorrow. New growth is generally an unknown unless we have some larger projects in the pipeline. Solid waste and recycling. Solid waste, depending on tonnage, if the tonnage goes down, our rates would go down related to that. Recycling, the market is always variable for recycling. The age of our infrastructure and facilities and the needs to keep those viable. Our public safety needs, our energy costs and how we can impact those. Our clean energy and sustainability recommendations and moving forward on that roadmap. The redevelopment of 12 North Main Street and realizing redevelopment related to that project. Our hotel and meals excise tax, which luckily is coming to pre-pandemic levels. Our snow and ice deficit dependent upon the weather. The fair share apportionment that we are finally realizing through the millionaire's tax, and an override versus non-override budget that we'll be discussing further this evening. So the next few slides, you'll see a variety of charts. We've discussed all of this kind of nebulously, and now we're kind of coming down to more numbers and realizations. We have presented a reduced services budget to the select board and are now currently working through public hearings with the finance committee. And we're also working through a proposed Proposition 2.5 override budget. The next few slides, you will see the tracking of a reduced services budget and how that leans on the year-over-year increases. And then you'll see two options that the board can consider. And I want to be clear that these numbers are approximate at this time. We're still maintaining and gathering feedback from the Finance Committee public hearings and what we're seeing in the community related to a proposed override budget. We could do an approximate $8 million override for 2 years, utilizing a stabilization fund. So all of that money would go in the fund in year 1, and we draw down on that fund in year 2 to complement. And then an approximate split of 5.5 in year 1, and then adding 3.5 in year 2 without a stabilization fund.
And just to be clear, for 2 years, I think what you mean there is one approach, we would do an override immediately, $8 million override, that'd be added to the tax levy going forward in perpetuity, not for only 2 years, but that might target the short-term needs that we have in the first 2 budget years.
Correct.
Okay.
And you might want, I mean, I'm assuming it's because of compound interest, but you got 8 versus 9.
Yes.
So
Yeah, and that's just to be clear, and we'll talk more about this, but we have been getting a lot of feedback that it'll be easier for people to absorb something split in 2 years. You're right, you could split 8 in 2 years and that would also have the same benefit. We were modeling this just because, as you see on later slides, these are the things that we'll have to decide together is what's the right approach to the community, and what's the amount, and is it better to split over 2 years, or is it better to do one and have the stabilization fund approach that we talked about?
Okay. So in this slide, the gray bars show the fiscal year Proposition 2.5 levy limit. Along the left-hand side, you'll see that in millions of dollars. And then the red bar above is the structural deficit that we are realizing for fiscal 25 through fiscal 28, where our projections are currently at. In this slide, we're showing that 2-year override with a Proposition 2.5 stabilization fund, in which we're currently modeling a $8 million override in year one. 2.7 million of that would go to an override stabilization fund and be able to earn interest in that fund. The override amount in fiscal year 25 is shown in the lighter yellow. And then in fiscal year 26, we would draw down on that stabilization fund to fully fund that fiscal 26 budget. And then in fiscal 27, we would draw down additional funds, but it's not quite enough to have a balanced budget based upon the projections that we're seeing today. Next slide, please. The next scenario is stepping into an override. In fiscal 25, it would be a $5.5 million increase. And then in fiscal 26, it would be $3.5 million. There still is a slight gap in fiscal 26 that we'd either have to close by decreasing the budget or realize new growth that was not anticipated. But we still would have a cliff and a gap in fiscal 27 and 28 that would either be decreases to the budget, or we would be realizing additional revenue through efficiencies, new growth, or other avenues. So next steps, I'm not going to read through this slide. The other next step that I want to just highlight for the board and members of the public is that I attended the Massachusetts Municipal Association annual conference on Friday, and the governor and lieutenant governor were in attendance and presented to us what they filed yesterday called the Municipal Empowerment Act. Realizing that Westford is not the only municipality going through these budgetary challenges due to the inflationary pressures, they have filed a bill, and if passed, would allow for municipalities to adopt an increase in local excise, meals, hotel, and cannabis. We do not have cannabis, but that would be a town meeting action if the board chose to do that if this bill passes. There would also be an option to increase local vehicle excise tax, again, a town meeting option. And then there are additional exemptions that are in this bill for seniors, veterans, and others who meet those means tested. So we'll be carefully following that bill as it goes through the legislature. I also want to let the board know that in 2023, a bill was passed with an exemption for trusts or conservators who oversee estates for seniors who are in a certain category. We would like to put together a committee to study what that would mean for the town of Westford, as we currently don't take advantage of that. So next slide, Dan. Again, just want to remind the public how they can stay involved, and their voice can certainly be heard. Attending the final Finance Committee budget hearings this Thursday and next Thursday. Monitoring that budget website that I spoke about earlier in the meeting. Of course, sending emails to myself or giving me a call, and I'll pass that along to the board. There's a variety of educational videos that were put together, and most certainly attending town meeting on March 23rd to have your vote heard. So with that, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks. Dan, can you go back to I think it's slide 7. One before, there you go. So we're approaching the point that we need to give some pretty clear guidance about how we want to close out the fiscal 25 budget process. And so what we want to do is take a step back and look at the 3-year buildup of costs that were forecast from the contracts we've been stepping into, we've discussed many times. The cumulative event of those step-ins that happen over the course of 3 years is in the 13 million plus range. So if we just carry forward the contracts that we are currently engaged in, that budget is forecast by the Budget Task Force is about a $13 million increase. We know 2 things. We know we can't go to the public and ask for all of that money to cover it. We have to both ask for public support to avoid loss of services, but then we're going to have to take responsibility for finding efficiencies, new revenue gains, and budget adjustments because we can't get to the whole number just with one or the other. We have to do both. We also, I think, know that we can't enter fiscal 28 with a structural deficit. It doesn't make any sense for us to do a partial solution that covers 1 year or 2 years when we know this is a 3-year problem, and I think it's our obligation to make sure we're trying to get to the fiscal 28 and committed to getting fiscal 28 without stepping into a deficit that year. So Dan, if you could hop forward 2. So we've gotten enough, we will figure out, I think, what the right amount is, but we've gotten a bunch of feedback that says people feel like the opportunity to step in over 2 years gives them an opportunity to plan. So that's one of the options that we're working right now. The other thing we would need to do is issue budget guidance for 25 and then
26.
also 26 and 27, because we would have to give guidance about cuts, not from the budget that we're at now, not from the 2.5 level, but from this top level, this level that's implied by the budget task force numbers, so that by the time we get to 28, we land at the right number and aren't entering with a fiscal deficit. I'm going to draw a picture on here, which I apologize if you're not in the room. This may be a little bit hard to see, but I think we need to give guidance that sets the budget here. We begin to make progress in 25 by reducing from this kind of full level needs budget that we've been working with so far. And then we need to give further guidance about where we're going to be targeting in 26 and 27, so that when we land here, we're not in the structural deficit. We basically can expect the Prop 2.5 increase from 27 to 28 to cover the forecasted needs. And to give some numbers, if we're around 14 difference or 13 difference, if we did a 9 million override, that's 4 and change. I think we'd look for something like a $500,000 reduction from the current budget that we've been working with for 25, knowing that we'd need a little bit less than 2 million reduced from this target levels from below this top level in each of the 2 years. And the way that math works is, if you got a $4.5 million total difference from what the override would bring to what the total need is based on the forecast, you have to step that in pieces. One way you could do that would be 500,000, 2 million, 2 million, something like that. So I think the discussion that I hope we can have tonight is around this approach, and do we feel like we're at the point where we can give some guidance to Kristen and Dan and the budget makers about what we'd like to see for fiscal 25, and then if we agree that we need to enter 28 without a structural deficit, the kinds of levels relative to this top carry forward we saw in the budget task force in each of the next 2 years. And again, the numbers we've been thinking about that would get us here would be something like 500,000 below the level services budget we've been talking about, the needs budget we've been talking about, and then roughly 2 million guidance below these peak points in each of the following 2 years. So let me open up to the board and see if there are either clarifying questions or responses to the approach of this, basically this 3-year approach and the kind of guidance we might want to give tonight.
Andrea has her hand.
Yep, Andrea?
Hi, thank you. I think this question is for, in fact, I know this question is for Dan. If we were to do the override through two separate, 5.5 and then 3.5. So first, I think we're talking about an override in not only this year, but next year as well. Is that right, Tom? Or Dan?
So what we did in the past with the teacher override back in 2017-18 is we authorized one override amount for 1.6 million. Then at special town meeting, we reduced the school budget by $1,040,000, so we could sort of step that in over 3 years.
I think the approach, Andrea, would be we would pass one override, but then also pass at the same time a mechanism so that we would only assess the first block in the first year, and then would assess the whole amount in the second year, if that makes sense. So we wouldn't have two separate votes. We'd have one vote and then have provisions for only assessing part the first year.
That does make sense, because that was one of my concerns, and then my other concern, and I think by doing it this way also addresses this, is if you were to have two separate overrides versus one override, the impact upon our residents and taxpayers in terms of two separate overrides, I think that would ultimately cause an increase in the impact to them in that way. So having one override and then allocating it or doing what we need to do makes sense to me. So those were my questions. I just want to make sure that when we do an override, if we do an override and if it passes, that there are no surprises for our residents in subsequent years 2 and 3 that they get hit with additional costs.
Right, and our commitment would need to be that we are budgeting with full knowledge of where we are, and we understand that we need to get to fiscal 28 without a structural deficit. So to your point, the intent would be to bring one vote forward that addresses the full 3 years of the situation that we've identified.
Thanks.
Did you have your hands up? hand up.
Yeah.
Scott?
Because I don't, I was not picturing it as one override in two pieces, which I don't like. I was picturing it as two separate overrides, which I do like. Because, first of all, we haven't cut enough. I mean, that's, I think I would agree that we correctly said, what's it look like with, an override budget? What's it look like with level services budget, with efficiency cuts, but nothing more than that, right? As we've gone through the first couple of meetings with the FinCom and, a few more to come, you look at what that cut is to get to a zero override budget, and I think that's too much, so we don't want to cut all that. But there are some things that are on the table that are not ideal, but we could live with. And if we really believe that this is a budget crisis, it has to be pain, it has to be felt by taxpayers and, I think, services both, not just taxpayers. So I think we need to get some guidance into more cuts for 25 at least. I presume that somehow that Chris works that up. Chris works that with Chris in terms of how schools in town absorb that intelligently. What I liked about the two-parter is, the fact that we could have, if town meeting approved it, increase local options taxes next year. If you have to raise money, I'd much rather do that through discretionary spending. If you've got a $70,000 Lexus, you pay more than if you have a '98 Buick Riviera, right? And if you want to get pizza, that's different from getting steak. So we would have more visibility next year into what that revenue gain might be. Is that 200 grand? Is it $1 million? I don't know. But we're looking at asking for money in a future year without knowing what the revenue picture looks like for that year, which seems to me to be confusing. So I like the approach of the two-step to make it easier for people to absorb. I'm not sure I like, but I also think it's about us time and space in terms of how do we rationalize 26 and doing all at once. We don't buy that.
Okay. Andrea, I see your hand again.
I guess, yeah, I also had another question. So in forecasting out to 28, all of our town contracts are gonna come due again during this time frame. Has that been factored in?
Roughly it has, but we don't know where we will be in the market. We can't do our benchmark analysis for our fiscal 26 contract start until we have that benchmark data. So Dan has done a rough estimate for what we anticipate that those contracts will be, but we're not firm on those dollar amounts. Anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that's basically it. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we've been thoughtful about the forecast, but we only can use the information we have, which is limited. I'm sorry, Andrew, do you have another?
No, I just hadn't put my hand down because
Okay.
you guys froze for a minute and I was trying to figure that out, okay?
John, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was looking for something, I'm looking for something in between the 2.5 override and the budget, the lower budget. Something in between. I think we gotta do some cutting there. We can't just say we're gonna do the whole shebang. I think we need to look forward and rope in things like our excluded debt and consider some adjustments we might want to make, because we've got a significant bow wave. When you look at that chart that Daniel, one of my favorite charts, a significant bow wave out there of excluded debt coming. And I think we may need to adjust some of our plans. So I think we need to bring all that in and look at that all in the budget and see if we can come up with something less. Now, phasing it, if we say we pass something that's two-phase or just we include 2 years and we don't have an override, I think we need to lessen the burden on the taxpayer. I don't want to hit them real hard, I'd rather not do any of that. I mean, we'd all do that. And I know we have to, there's things built into that, but I'm just concerned about that.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for something in the middle, something to be a little more gradual and some more considerate to taxpayer, in my view.
Right.
Can I just respond to Scott's, and just a question for you
Sure.
about your concern about doing it in 2 steps versus 1 step. There's definitely validity to both. One of the assurances we would get if we were to do it in 1 step is we know exactly where we're going to get in 26, and if we do see that realized revenue, we don't have to tax to the full levy. But I can definitely see your point as well of stepping it in. We're going to be going through the same process at this time next year if we do it in 2 steps. There will be that bit of uncertainty. Will the voters vote for it or not? So I just want to make sure the board has that knowledge of we could have the same uncertainty next year, or we could know where we're at and we could not tax to the full levy amount.
But we also know that if we're looking at a level, we got one line that we've drawn, right? And if we're doing this the way a statistician would do it, there'd be a bandwidth which gets wider with unknowns the farther out you go.
Yep.
And so I was trying to find, how do we narrow that bandwidth? And because we talked 2 weeks ago, I think it was, looking at the rec department, what programs are solvent, which ones are subsidized, that we can't fix quickly, but you can fix that in 2 years. And the task force has got lots of stuff that you can't fix in year 1, but you can fix in years 2 and 3, but the uncertainty of what that buys you is less clear. So I'm just trying to think, rather than hypothetically, rather than doing one big number, which is assuming facts, not evidence, how do you plan? And again, it could fail in year 2, in which case you got a big problem, but no worse than we have now, and would a 2-step override be more palatable and maybe pass when a big number, wouldn't? Because we're also saying to the residents, trust us to bankroll that difference and not spend it. Now, I trust me and I trust you, but trust the government is pretty low these days. And
So just to be very clear, so when we're talking about 1 step versus 2, I think two-step variants have shown up. So 1 step would be assessing more than you need in the first year, putting it in reserve, and then using that as an offset in later years. That's one thing. The other would be to step in, so assess a lower amount the first year, and then a larger, and then an incrementally smaller amount, but then get to the second year. What's on the table is you could either do that in 1 vote, in which case you would authorize 5.5, for example, in the first year, and then an additional 3.5 in the second year. You could do that in 1 vote, or Scott, I think you're suggesting you could also do it in 2 votes. You could do exactly the same uncertainty double budget process in the second year again, and do an override again. I guess if you're going to make a plus minus chart there, it's an enormous amount of work to do it twice, unless you think things are going to change enough that you're not going to need about that amount of money. I think our starting point is like 13 million plus. I think if we're fortunate, it'll come down some, but I don't see any scenario that it's going to come down to 10 or 9 or some smaller number like that. So you may be taking on a lot of work for an uncertainty which is sort of beyond the scope of what anyone's really thinking about for an override. The other thing I'll mention is that I think we are proposing tonight to give some guidance about fiscal 25, 26, 27. We don't have to reach final amounts, but the idea of giving a little bit smaller amount of guidance for reduction from the currently planned budget, say $500,000, is that we don't have a lot of time to step into it. We've got more time in year 2 and 3 to figure out solutions. So if we think we're going to have $4.5 to $5 million of money, even if the override passes, we're going to still have that amount we need to pull out of the budget to stay on track and not enter fiscal 28 with a deficit. The idea of doing a smaller amount in the first year is that we're right on top of it. And then we would do a bigger number in the second year and the third year when we've got more time to approach it. So I do think it'll be helpful if we can give some directional guidance to the budget planners of where we want to land this budget, because I think without a constraint, it's going to be very difficult for schools in town and everyone to pick a new number. The number I'm working with right now is 500,000. That is only because in quick conversations, that seems like an achievable number from what we've seen, and it does leave remaining challenges in year 2 and 3 for us to identify and solidify, but I think that that's a number that we could target and be successful with. I think the problem with picking a bigger number is that we're right on top of it. We don't have a lot of time to work a lot of solutions, and we know these contract costs are coming July 1st. John?
Well, when you're balancing the fact you're doing it in 2 stages or 1 stage, and, or having 2 different overrides, One of them is, you mentioned we risk the second override not passing. Well, I'd rather err on the side of having the 2 override votes and not worry about that. That's up to the taxpayer. And I'd rather have less of an impact immediately so that we can the citizens can move into that way. And the tax increase would be more gradual. So I'd look for something like that. And if the next year they didn't want the override, that's up to the taxpayer. That's up to the voters.
Just the thing to be aware of is if we feel like the interest of the taxpayer is to solve this 3-year problem, we could address it in a number of ways. One you talked about, one we've talked about. I just wouldn't underestimate the amount of uncertainty and work and anxiety that gets produced. I would just make sure it's worth it. So if we think that the outcome's going to change and there's going to be that much new information to absorb next year that we really can't see far enough in the future to know what we're going to need to solve this 3-year problem in year 2, if we really believe that, it's probably worth all the anxiety and effort. If we don't think, I mean, the Budget Task Force would say, we know, we've already entered these contracts. Like we know exactly what's going to happen in year 2. The level of uncertainty about what we're going to need in year 2 is very, very low. So if you're deciding to go through the whole process again in the second year, and there's really not new information to get, I guess I'd wonder if we aren't serving the taxpayers better by bringing the issue and making a broader solution that is going to tackle more of the whole problem. But I understand your thought. I'm just.
And of course, that can be changed at town meeting.
Yes, you could choose to assess less. If you decide to do that, to Kristen's point, you could say, we know we don't need it. I guess other thoughts tonight. We're not going to decide tonight exactly what the number is. We're not going to decide tonight exactly how to structure it because we have time left to do that. But we do need to begin to hone in on an approach, and specifically we have to give guidance around what we want for fiscal 25 because we're running out of time. If you go through where we are now, we've got 2 more hearings with the FinCom. I think it's going to be 1 meeting beyond that. We're going to have to be landing on a final budget something like our February 13th meeting because we'll be in the final adjustment phase to go to town meeting. So I think we have to give that kind of constraint to the budget planners very, very soon, yes.
So at this
Chris.
point then, if we're just thinking about FY25, are we thinking 5 million versus 5.5 million for that year? Is that really what we're really talking about?
So if you're talking about the amount beyond, if we're talking about the amount that these contracts are going to go beyond the 2.5 levy,
Yeah.
right now we're at about 5.5 with what this level service budget that's been put forward by town schools. I'm proposing that we give a constraint that lowers that so we get started on it. And so essentially it would be it wouldn't be a level services budget, it would be a budget that is the override accompanying budget that now the overage relative to 2.5 would be 5 instead of 5.5.
But
Yes.
that's the direction you're saying folks would like to have.
I think we need to give that kind of direction for us to land on a budget that we've all made the right trade-offs internally. I don't really see another way to do
we
that.
have an idea of the $500,000 worth of cuts? Do we need to give direction on, say, half comes from town, half comes from school,
Yeah, so we would probably use the traditional allocation formula in reverse or something like it. Kristen and Chris Chu and the various counterparts would meet and agree on that split. We would get to see their proposal. So once again, we could say, we find that proposal unacceptable or we think it should be further trimmed. But at least then we get a budget we could look at and potentially agree on in the timeline that we've got. So we're not saying we're not going to see it again. We would see exactly what trade-offs they propose to hit this threshold that I'm proposing, if that makes sense.
And we still have 2 more Finance Committee budget hearings. So there's certainly been things that have been brought up in the past 2 budget hearings that we're taking into account. And Dan and I have a running tally right now of, yep, let's look at that, let's tick that, let's reduce that. But we still need to have the benefit of 2 additional meetings as well.
And I think it's important that the public sees that we are a partner in this and we're not going to go to them for the whole solution for all these contract increases because that's unworkable for them. We're going to team up, and over the course of the next couple of years, we're going to find ways in the town budget to accommodate and adapt, and we're going to also ask for their participation in it to avoid any sudden turns and dramatic losses that at least many of us would be concerned about. Yeah, Chris?
So you mentioned when you went to this conference that there was going to be some legislation that might allow us to change certain local taxes. Are there any that we can consider changing right now or at town meeting just to get the ball
No,
rolling?
it was all in a bill filed yesterday that will have to make its way through the legislature and then signed into law. The one that is currently on the books that we don't take advantage of is a senior means tested exemption that allows for a trustee or a conservator to take advantage of. So we do want to study that, and we're committed to moving forward to study that. But that likely would not make it on the March
Yep.
warrant. It would be in October, or if there's another special town meeting, perhaps.
Thank you.
So I think on the decision list for tonight, we are going to talk about the warrant and whether we want a warrant article that would allow us to bring an override. We'll talk about that shortly. And I guess I'd just like a sense of the board, whether this track of beginning to set constraints that'll arc us into entering fiscal '28 without a structural deficit, if we feel comfortable with that approach, and also if we want to give at least preliminary guidance on the amount that I put forward for the town and schools to begin to work to.
I guess, I mean, we've always sort of known that there was an arc of cuts, so we're just basically accelerating that to this year. Yeah, I guess, between Kristen and Dan, in your side notes of what looked reasonable to cut between schools and and the town's side, we've probably got about, what, 3/4 of the budget now reviewed, or a little less, maybe 70%?
I would say a little less
Yeah.
than that, because we haven't done public safety. That's a huge aspect, and then general government,
Right,
which
but
is another large aspect.
if through that, say, I'll call it 70%, whatever it is, call it 2/3, be nice. If the cuts that so far are around 300 grand, it says 500 grand is the right number. If the cuts are 500 grand, then the number becomes like 700 grand, right? So, I mean, assuming it's linear, which it may not be. But do we have a feel for what the size of those pencil-in cuts, could be?
We're only halfway through the hearing,
Yeah.
so it's tough to base off, we just had the schools last week too, so I mean, I think we saw all the potential decreases they have. They're all outlined, so it's just a matter of what's acceptable, so.
Right, I mean, 'cause I have my own little tally too, but that's with mine. We haven't discussed any of that as a team.
I mean, I guess what I would expect is that we would start off with some sort of guidance target, and then have an opportunity to talk about it at our next meeting and say, okay, now we've been through the budget hearings, and we don't think this is realistic, or we do think this is realistic, or this is what we think a better number is. But I think without giving some sort of constraint, it's going to become an impossible problem.
I think 500 grand is your minimum. Of course, it's if you look at a 5-year override, okay, well, even at that we're paying, we'll pay 10%, and taxpayers got 90%, right? That's kind of, even at 500 grand, that's a split. So I think we need to commit to at least 500,000 in cuts, but I guess how much work is if we come back in 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks, I guess, with a 3-week layover. If you say, well, it is more 700, not 500, does that really screw everything up and we're back to square one again? So that's why I was trying to get a feel for where we had landed so far, to give me a ballpark of where we want to go.
I don't think we've done an analysis for schools, because ultimately we give them a number and they work within it, but I want to be fair and open and honest with them. I think in the, DPW, library, cemetery realm, we're likely able to do 150 to 200,000. Recreation was brought up, but there's some concerns about the indirect costs and how that would relate to the budget. So we're going to bring that back to the finance committee and discuss that. So I don't want to comment on recreation this evening. So a reduction in the level services budget, I'm seeing about 150,000 to 200 based upon the first hearing, based upon the feedback that we received. Schools, again, we'd want to have that conversation, and then what's to come Thursday and next Thursday.
Yeah, John?
I'd like to have a better understanding of what that landing spot in 2018 looks like. What's what's involved in that budget that we could take a look at that might be reduced looking forward. And I'm particularly looking at the way we're accumulating debt, especially,
28, do you mean 28?
2028.
or 2028,
Yeah.
yeah. 10 years, what's 10 years?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, 2028.
Give or take a
But,
decade.
yeah, well, 28.
Yeah.
28. And to take a look at that and see if there's some adjustments we could make in that would lessen it. Because, you know, we're talking, I mean, it's a little bit too much.
Well, one idea that came up from our finance committee chair was if we've got this problem of really targeting, teaming up with the taxpayers to get to not having a structural deficit in 28, we can't budget once a year. We're going to have to do a quarterly review of some sort and say, how are we doing on these things that we think are going to generate new revenue, because some of them will take some time, but we need to put them on a timeline. How are we doing on some of these things like shared fleet maintenance? We need to put that on a timeline. So I think there's a lot of work for us beyond just the end of this budget process to get there. And I think part of the analysis is what you're talking about, is what I was getting at. If you look at where we need to land, that's a good way to help pick targets about what we need to be doing along the way.
At the right landing spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before Andrea, I just want to, can I just ask John a follow-up?
Sure, yeah, please.
Sorry, Andrea. So I'm just curious.
It's okay.
Yeah, so when you're talking about debt and the impact to the operating budget, can you just illuminate?
Well, we'll start paying off $1 million something plus for the library by that time.
Yeah.
And then that's just the excluded debt that we're taking on. We're assuming we'll do that. Maybe we want to take another look at it.
Well, we'll also be paying off debt for schools
Yeah.
and highways, so
But let's
the
look
net,
at-
the net would be dropping, even with the library.
Well, maybe. But if you look at that chart that he's got, it's still going up. It's still going up. And we're in a good spot now. But I think we need to look at that. We've got some things on the book going forward. I wanted to smooth that thing out. I think it's I'm just concerned that the 28 target, is that too high? So some of the things that we're thinking about now in the current budget, we looked at continue to trim in the forward budget. I'm just concerned about where we're going to land, how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
Do it gradually, the least impact on the taxpayers instantly as we can, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think doing that kind of analysis to look at sort of what are the things we can have influence on, how do we land in the right place makes sense. I also think in maybe the next meeting, coming back to what's the dollar and cents pocketbook impact of what's going to be on people's tax bill. So we're talking about these and the potential effects of the override, but what also is happening with excluded debt related payments and water bill and whatever else is showing up at people's mailbox. So
Yeah.
I think we should take that up next. I think we have to be clear with the taxpayer on that. I agree with the idea of not budgeting once a year. If we're in a situation like this, we got to look longer and we have to break it into pieces. So let's do those things. I guess we do need to glide in on some sort of guidance, and it could be a range, but I think we got to get something that we want to give the budget planners. And Scott, to your point, part of the reason that in the very short term, it is, more support from the override, less support from town cuts, is that these cuts are showing up suddenly.
Well, I get it,
Okay. Just it's not a choice. We'd rather balance it throughout. It's just a circumstance that we can't react to the energy bill between now and tomorrow.
But your arc is 13.5 in the whole, and you're only proposing a $9 million override. So there's $4 million of cuts in the out years, even assuming this. No, I get it.
No, so that's absolutely right. I'm assuming that we'll have time and ability to be successful with those cuts with more time.
It may not even be that much in terms of cuts, because hopefully we'll be able to come up with ways to increase revenue in that time frame.
Oh, I mean, MBTA
And we'll
communities,
know.
if it comes online, you got all those permitting fees that go up, but that's again, facts, not evidence. So.
And we wouldn't budget in a hard way, 27 now. I mean, you're right, we would continue to learn, and maybe we would see some things. We could see that the insurance cost, which tends to go up and down, doesn't continue up. a lot of things could happen, and we would take advantage of all those, but
So,
25, we got it.
do we have any more information on how the millionaire's tax is going to roll into the school's funding?
So yes, we do have more information. It is not going to roll into the school's funding directly. It's going to be going into state matters that may trickle down in a certain way. So it's actually spread out along pre-K all the way up through college. So it's not specifically K through 12, and it's not given directly to the town of Westford. So we may receive it in some grants, we may receive it in some in-kind, but there's no formula for the foreseeable future related to the educational apportionment.
Okay.
Oh, Andrea, hi.
Hi, remember me? So, I guess, I share everybody's concerns about, where we land in the arc that we get to, how we get to 28, for sure. But I think to sort of focus us back on what we need to do tonight, what I'm hearing from you, Tom, is that we need to give some direction to the budget folks in terms of, an amount that we all need to work together towards, decreasing, further cuts and decreasing the budget. So that's what I hear you saying, that the immediate action item is for tonight. Is that right, Tom?
That's right. I think we have to get started on this series of reductions to land in the right place.
So I know that you've suggested $500,000. So in order to sort of get the discussion going and move things along, I'm going to make that motion.
Okay, thank you. Do you want a second or move to discussion?
I was second, but also,
Okay,
again, really, really crude math. If you're at, say, 150 town side, where we are so far through the process, realistically, by the end of the process, we could be at 250 of cuts. If we assume that town and schools roughly 50-50, 55-40, whatever that number is, roughly 50-50, that is 500. So it's not like it's a dartboard. I think actually the data so far in house supports 500. So I would second India's motion. I think it makes some sense.
okay. Other discussion for just fiscal 25 guidance?
Well, I'd like to look for more.
I don't think
I'd
we're-
like, let's start with 500, and let's see if we can find more than that, because that doesn't sound like
Okay.
enough to me.
Okay, well, at least we'll have a starting point for guidance, assuming the board votes. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, Andrea?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Okay, thank you. This is one of many difficult conversations on this complex and difficult topic. And we will have a few more opportunities to narrow in on approach and structure and numbers. I think what we're agreeing on tonight is that we are going to bring forward an override of some sort with final numbers to be determined. And when we get to the warrant discussion, we'll have that part of the discussion again. Okay, I think that's all we can get done on that right now.
That's
Okay.
helpful, thank you.
Next up is annual town meeting. I need my glasses back. Saturday, March 23rd, 2024 at 9 a.m. To review proposed warrant articles and to vote the warrant. And I think we want to welcome, do we want to welcome the moderator up to the table? Welcome, moderator, Madam Moderator. And I know we didn't have it on the agenda tonight, but when will we be talking about sort of all the improvements we're making to make sure this next town meeting is an absolutely fantastic experience for everyone that attends?
Yeah, so we have an internal meeting tomorrow
Okay.
to discuss that, and then we'll have a larger internal meeting probably in the next week or two after that. And then I would anticipate that either, your February 13th meeting is filling up quite quickly. We could give a preliminary on that and then have a full-blown conversation of all the enhancements at your second meeting in February, unless you feel that you need a full-blown conversation on the 13th.
Why don't we proceed as you suggest, and
Okay.
we can adjust.
But the
with
wheels are in
questions.
motion for everything. It's
Okay.
just final coordination meetings and the like. So
Okay, so Kristen, are you gonna take us through the proposal?
I can, and then
Okay.
please step in as you wish.
Sure.
So I will just give you the high-level overview of the warrant as it stands right now. Dan will go through each individual article, so if you want to bring up that document at your convenience while I'm going through this. Right now, in your packet, there is a suggested town meeting warrant with 21 articles. One includes a citizen petition, and 3 articles are potentially coming out based upon the discussions that we're having this evening, as well as information that is coming due. I want to be really clear with the board and members of the public that these articles are currently in no particular order. They're really in the order that has been traditional, but between conversations with the select board and the moderator and myself, we're able to move those articles around as we see fit based upon the business that needs to be done at town meeting. And we will review and finalize that order at the February 13th meeting. We are also in concert with town council reviewing the warrant articles, and he has advised that if we did want to set a time certain for any of these articles, we can certainly do that at the moderator's discretion. So the wheels are churning, and with that, I will have Dan go through each individual article. Again, these are just, I would say, the laundry list of articles. The order and the cadence can certainly be adjusted in the next 2 weeks.
All right, so we have some familiar ones to start out this year. The first one is to accept town reports, which we have every year. Then we get into the FY24 financial articles. The second article is for FY24 budget supplemental appropriations. We know we need a little bit for the sealer weights and measures, but less than $1,000. Then, of course, we have the issue with solid waste too, which we would use this article if we do have to appropriate funds. Next up, we have perchlorate, which is recurring article. Then we get into capital. For FY24, where we list all of the amounts and capital here in the warrant. So I won't go over all this. I'll actually be presenting this next Thursday night at the budget hearing.
And capital will be reviewing it one last time as well.
Yep,
February 2nd.
February 2nd, yep, Friday after. We had a placeholder here for Amoresco, which we don't think we're gonna have enough information in time to have for the town meeting. So we were suggesting to remove this at this
Right.
point.
So there will be a presentation tomorrow night to Clean Energy with the status. Amoresco was not able to get the contractors in the building in time. I don't believe that it's an Amoresco problem. Jeff Goodwin was saying he's having problems getting contractors in our building due to work. So this will more than likely be removed from the warrant based upon the timing and the amount of information that needs to be reviewed to move something forward. So any budgetary matters related to an energy investment grade audit, building enhancements would not be on the town meeting warrant for March.
And we're certain enough at this point that you propose we just take it off?
Yes, I do.
All right. Next article is for community preservation funds, which we have every year. Article 6 is to authorize the expenditure limits for our revolving funds. Article 7 is the approved fiscal year 2025 operating budget. This is the Prop 2.5 restricted budget. That's followed by a placeholder if the board chooses to put approve the fiscal year 2025 general operating budget Prop 2.5 override. So we vote the normal budget first, so we have a budget in place July 1st in case the override fails at the ballot or at town meeting. And then we have the second article being the override amount. Article 9 was in case the board chose to go with the override stabilization amount, where we raise the entire amount in year 1 and use the stabilization to offset it. Based on the conversation, doesn't sound like that is the route we want to take tonight, so we could remove this article as well.
I guess I would leave this for now, Dan.
Okay.
I don't think we reached a conclusion on that.
Okay.
But I thank you for identifying that it's in flux.
Okay, so it's something we may have to reopen later on during the process, which we've done in the past. Article 10, again, just annual article to appropriate Chapter 90 funds. And going down to 12 is the water OPEB that we have every year as well. 13 is a local option that Will Nazer, our chief assessor, brought forward. We do have a resident that just moved into town who is a military veteran that was receiving exemption in a previous town for about $850, but we have to accept the local option to actually give him that exemption. So we're looking at a total cost about $850 to accept this this option.
And this basically creates a category that other people in town could access
That's
if they
correct.
qualify. Okay.
Yep. So it doesn't just apply to that one person, it'll be anybody in the future. 14, we see this every year, it authorizes the select board to accept easements. 15 is from Paul Starrett. We're actually accepting the easement for the Plain Road sidewalk. We like to spell that out when we have these specific projects. 16 and 17 are part of the MICMAC for the MBTA housing. We first have to update the floodplain, and this is according to Jeff Morissette, and then we can accept the MBTA Community Multi-Housing Overlay District as required by the state. 18, again, this is a placeholder that we don't believe will have the information in time for town meeting. It was this to stretch energy code. So, Kristen, are we requesting to remove this?
We are. I know we had a conversation at your last meeting because the Clean Energy Committee had requested that this be placed on your March town meeting. Staff and I met over the course of the past 2 weeks and provided a memorandum with supporting information to the board on Friday. Based upon the research that we've done, based upon the outreach that we would like to do to residents and contractors, we would respectfully request that this be pushed to October of 2024 for consideration at that time.
Any concerns or discussion? Andrea?
Yeah. I'm sorry, you want to push, when do you want to push this off till, Kristen? I missed what you said.
October of 2024 town meeting?
Okay, and that's because you all feel like you can't meet the March town meeting?
We don't feel that we can adequately educate members of the public and the construction industry related to this stretch code, and we don't feel like we have adequate data related to additional costs for residential units. We don't have adequate data of how this might affect MBTA construction, so we would like more time if the board would allow that, but certainly the discretion is up to the board. We provided our rationale and information, but it's ultimately a board decision.
I mean, at the last meeting, I voiced exactly those concerns, said, well, I'll put it in the warrant, but I can't guarantee I'll support it because I don't know those answers. So if we're not going to know the answers, then I wouldn't support it. So I think you pull it and put it back when we can answer them.
Andrea, I see your hand still up. Do you have another point or just
No, I forgot to put it down.
Zoom momentum? Okay. Okay. John?
I agree with delaying it. I mean, I looked at this thing pretty thoroughly before we went to that last meeting with Clean Energy, and I don't see the need to hurry. I mean, there's no deadline here. Nothing's really gonna change a lot. I think we need to just take a closer look at it, and I think the public needs a better look at it. I mean, as far as information. I agree with that.
Now my hand's up.
Okay. Andrea?
I'm disappointed that we're going to delay it. I would like to get this before the town as soon as possible, so while I hear the concerns about not having enough information, I really, if we are not going to put it on this, I really want a commitment that we put it on for October of 2024.
Does that seem like that'll fit? I know that some of the same people who would be doing this kind of assessment determination work are currently doing a few other projects that are coming before us. Will they have bandwidth to give the right amount of attention to this before October?
Based upon my conversations with them, yes, absolutely, and we will be able to line up educational opportunities through the state to help provide with that education as well to the public. So I can provide a commitment to the board that we will be ready in October of 2024 if the board so wishes to put this on based upon the information they have at that time.
Okay. I think we have consensus, well, more or less consensus that this is the right decision to, so I think we don't need a vote on this, right?
No,
We're just
just an
discussing. Okay.
indication.
So I
yeah.
think it sounds like the right thing to do is to commit to October and pull this for now.
Okay, moving on, Article 18 is from Chief Chambers. It's basically a solicitation and canvassing door to door. It's to be able to run background checks on people requesting to solicit in our town. This is all written by KP Law, so it's quite long, so I'll scroll through.
To be honest, I haven't seen this final.
Would you mind just coming up to the mic? Sorry, Chief.
I thought Mike wrote it.
I was gonna say,
great.
Good job, Chief.
Yeah, I'm legalese. The only thing that I wasn't aware, like, I did see part of this. I don't know if it's changed since I've seen it, but does it include the increase in the fee?
There is a placeholder for the fee.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Well, honestly, I'd like a little bit more time with this, I think, but I would leave it on for now, I think. I don't know how other people feel about this article for now.
Well, I'm just curious, why is it coming forward? I mean,
So our bylaw that we had previously, which I know we had a solicitor permit that was denied, that had come before you, needs to be updated. I believe it was 2011. There was some new laws that were enacted that kind of fell by the wayside that really need to be incorporated in the language of our bylaw. And this also does give us an opportunity to address the $5 that we were charging for bylaw permit for the solicitor's permits. So by increasing the permitting fee, we hope to discourage some of the fly-by-night companies that come in, because for $5, it creates a tremendous amount of work for the officer that gets assigned the backgrounds on them. You know, we have to check the Corey, as well as all the background information that we have to look up before we issue it, fingerprinting and photographing the individual. So, you know, each permit takes about a half an hour. That's, well, you know, charging $5 for the half an hour of an officer's time is well under what the compensation really should be. And then, Dan, I think under Article 19 as well, it kind of dovetails right into that, the solicitor bylaw. The only way that we can see somebody's out-of-state record is to update our civil fingerprinting bylaw. So by fingerprinting them, we do get their interstate index as well. So that's outside of Massachusetts. We will get their criminal record from outside of Massachusetts. So technically, we could currently, under the Corey laws, if you have a criminal record outside of the state, as long as you don't have a record in Massachusetts, that doesn't always come up under your Corey. So under the civil fingerprinting bylaw under Article 19, that will give us the opportunity to run the fingerprints through the federal system and receive all the information on any criminal bylaw before we issue any criminal record before we issue any solicitor's permits as well.
great, thank you.
Scott?
So does that cover only solicitors? I thought there was other.
Yeah, so it's,
other-
yeah, it would, sorry, maybe I'm kind of limiting some of the language that I'm using. Again, to be honest, I wasn't prepared to speak to this tonight. I didn't know it was on. So it is anybody that comes in, solicitor, anybody that's going to go door to door. I think the language should be in the beginning of this bylaw, exactly who it's going to apply to.
Yes, I thought it was a little broader than that. I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah, hawking, peddling, door-to-door solicitors, alcoholic beverages, owner-operator, public conveyance, dealer of secondhand articles, pawn dealers, hackney drivers, and ice cream truck and food vendors. This all does apply to.
So Uber falls under Hackney.
Hackney drivers, yes.
Okay, and the difference between the way it is now and this is we basically can access the full database as opposed to just getting what we get from Corey. Correct,
And it'll put us in compliance with where we really need to be for state law.
Okay, any comments on this one? I guess these two, 18 and 19. Okay. Looks like we're good. Thanks, Chief.
Okay.
Let's keep scrolling here. All right, Article 20 is to authorize the Cemetery Commission and Select Board to adopt policies and regulations rather than being the approval of town meeting. And then lastly, we got a citizen's petition in yesterday, Article 21, to rename Indigenous Peoples' Day to Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples' Day.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that is currently what we have before you.
Okay, so this will move forward and, except for the two that we decided to take off. Maybe we could just recap sort of budget, warrant, just a timeline of what's gonna happen. I know a lot of people have been following this. So I hate to put you on the spot, Kristen, because I know there's a little bit of a moving target, but could we just talk through sort of remaining budget issues, when we expect to get to a final budget, when we approve warrant, when we approve ballot language?
So the Finance Committee is holding a special meeting on February 5th to discuss all of their feedback related to the public hearings. We hope to have a final budget for you with at least a $500,000 cut by Friday, February 9th, for you to consider on Tuesday, February 13th. Also on February 13th, you will finalize and set the order of the warrant with the moderator. And then we'll move forward to prepare the Finance Committee budget book. We will then move forward with Finance Committee public hearings, and those public hearings will include the budget, so there will be conversation about the budget once again before it goes to town meeting. The Finance Committee will provide their recommendations on a number of warrant articles, not zoning. Planning Board is moving through their public hearing process right now related to MBTA communities, which kicked off yesterday. The floodplain bylaw is coming into play in the next few weeks. The Select Board then makes their recommendations on all of the warrant articles. And then we will prepare that Finance Committee book in detail and provide a mailer to all residents related to the March 23rd town meeting. So was there something that I did not capture, or?
I think that's right. I guess just for us, the point at which we'll have to have clearly identified the scale and structure of any override we're proposing. Does that come on the 13th, or the 13th, are we still, the warrant articles are called out, but the language?
The motions.
The motions actually will come later.
The second meeting in February.
Yeah, we'll get going on the motion language, so those are,
Okay. So ideally we would largely be zoning in on what we're planning on the 13th, and we'll see what we think is the final budget.
right.
But in terms of the actual motions, we'll have one more meeting before we'll be
Right,
sort of
27th
final,
meeting. Yep.
go to print.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks. Okay, anything else on?
I think
I have the
Andrea-
agenda, don't I? Yes,
Tom?
Andrea?
I think you need a motion to close the warrant.
Yes, I do, thank you.
So I'll move to close the warrant.
Second.
All in favor, Andrea?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Before you move on,
Yep.
could I, so, the thing I want to address is what you started out with, and that's the changes that we're making to town meeting that are gonna be improvements for the public. And I'd really like to start getting that stuff out to people as soon as possible. Not all of it is finalized yet, but the things that we have done, like purchase the clickers and how that's gonna work, and the new, polling pads and stuff like that. I'd really like to start getting that out, and hope everybody will help with that effort too. And then as we finalize the other stuff, some of the other things, then we'll put that information out as well. Because from the public point of view, they're gonna wanna know as far in advance as possible, or we're gonna wanna get that information out to them as far in advance as possible, so we reach as many people as possible before the town meeting, because there are gonna be some changes that people will need to know in advance. And a lot of people have been working on that, and it's very, very helpful that they have been, and we're almost there, and once we get to the point where we know exactly what's gonna happen, we'll have all the information out there. I just wanna make the public aware of that.
That'd be great, and in fact, we're working on a bunch of public education things related to this budget situation. We're gonna review sort of the current frequently asked questions list. We certainly need some questions on there, like, what should my expectations be for this meeting? Will we have the same tools to vote in various rooms?
Mm-hmm.
I know you've been working on this anyway. If you have a list of things that you expect are public questions
Sure.
that you could share with us, we don't need the answers yet necessarily, if that takes some time to develop, but I think it'd be really helpful, meet with the League of Women Voters tomorrow, we're gonna meet with seniors, and these same questions are gonna keep coming up.
Yeah.
I have at least a surface level understanding of what you're working on, but it'd be very helpful if we could
Yeah.
incorporate that all
I
into
can-
the
I can
same,
forward that to Kristen, and.
that'd be terrific, thank you.
Okay, great.
Tom, if I
Yes,
may,
Chris?
So along that topic of, how do we get that information out to the public? And it's the same thing with the budget, right? So, we have some very limited distribution channels that we can leverage. I mean, maybe when you all speak with the League of Women Voters, you you could bring this up and see if there's any way that the public has ideas on how we can get the word out better than we are able to do today. I know Chris and I have talked about the survey opportunity. Is that a mechanism that we can use to drive some education? I'll bring up again, you know, when I drive through Acton daily, they always have their highway signs up, and they're advertising special events. You know, that's another mechanism that we can, you know, get enforce other signs in town around the community. Superintendent's, you know, email distribution list is always a good one. We don't want to oversaturate, but you know, with these,
I don't think there's any danger of oversaturating.
I hope not, but you know, I would think we need to continue to drive to look for ways to get to the voters.
We really need to make use of WestfordCAT. We really need to make use of the town Facebook pages, like, you know, the fire and police have a page, and if we can post stuff on there regularly, people will see it, and you have quite a few followers, I think, and that gets it out there, and have people post on their own Facebook pages. So coming up with sort of one-page informational sheets is the best way to do that, because nobody wants to read a big, long thing. They just want to know the main points that they need to learn about. And so a few of those over the course of time between now and town meeting that can be posted in various places will work.
So, thank you, really good suggestions. A couple of things that you might be able to, we all might be able to kind of slipstream in on that are already happening. There are a bunch of short budget task force videos recorded at WestfordCAT that are now getting pushed out kind of in social media sequence. If you'd be willing to record a short update on town meeting procedures with them, that might be really helpful. We could just fold that into the same thing. And I don't want to volunteer Valerie Young. I'm sure she's listening out there and she's cursing me, but she's sort of a genius at the one-page infographic. And if you, like me, don't have those skills, I know she might be a good person to talk to, or there might be someone else you can pair up with to get, here's what you need to know about town meeting, parking, participation, et cetera, sign in, all the different things we're working on. So if you're able to, when it's complete, if you're able to get that up, we'll just push it into all the other things that are going on.
Okay, sounds good.
I mean, do you think it makes sense to have like that one pager for these budget discussions, specifically the override and the impacts related to that?
So there is a one-pager that maybe just got posted, which is sort of an update on the budget process. And we're going to have another one which will kind of capture where we land on exactly what the proposal is.
About. Yes.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have those. We'll definitely have those. And yeah, any good ideas for ways to communicate with the public? There's a lot of good people thinking about it, and we're asking for best practice ideas from all the other towns. One thing that hasn't come up tonight is that every week more towns realize they're in the same situation we are. More towns are announcing, if you've been following the news, overrides very, very similar to what we're talking about. It's an overall economic situation that we're all facing together. So we're all going to be sharing best practices and learning from each other about how to get public engaged. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the 805 item to consider the request from the Monuments and Memorials Committee to approve a granite post at the Wright Cemetery and Hillside Cemetery to recognize Revolutionary soldiers who are buried there, and we welcome Nancy Cook.
Thank you. Nancy Cook, 25 North Main. I think in your packets you've received a request from the museum to install 2 more granite posts, one at the Wright Cemetery and one at the Hillside Cemetery. They're the regular signs like on the front of the building here, only they have the QR code so you can actually find the location of the Revolutionary soldiers. These are the same signs you approved for West Lawn and Fairview, I think.
Yeah, I think the request was very clear. Any questions from board members?
Great idea.
Okay, yeah, so we appreciate the work, and that's wonderful. I guess I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Andrea?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
John?
All right.
Scott?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. Thank you very much, Nancy.
Thank you very much.
Next up, old new business, review and update the charge and membership of the Agricultural Commission.
So I'm not sure if anyone from the Agricultural Commission is in the room or online. If not, I can lead the conversation. Dan, do you see anyone?
I don't recognize any of the names for AdCom. Nope.
Okay.
So the Agricultural Commission currently has a minimum and maximum number of members on their quorum, and that is in your packet. Right now, maximum members of 12, minimum members of 7, a quorum for 6. They have come to the town manager's office and then subsequently to your board to ask for a reduction in the quorum members and the ultimate membership of that, because they're struggling to get people present and hold their business. I do note that they're looking to have a quorum of 4 members and a membership of 6. I know you've heard me say this before, it's always best to have an odd number for voting purposes. So I will provide that commentary to the board, but it's ultimately your decision of where you'd like to lie related to the makeup of the commission.
Could you do 6 and have one alternate, or is one of those being an alternate?
So what I would recommend is you either have 5 members and 3 as the quorum, or you have 7 members and 4 as a quorum. You could also have alternates as well. If people can't make it, they could step in for those voting members.
Well, they have 6 now, so that's why I was sort of thinking 5 would be that number, and then you have 1 as an alternate.
Sure, so you could have 5 voting members and 1 alternate if you wish.
Yeah.
I think that makes good sense.
Any other comments or feedback?
Yeah.
I mean, the only challenge with that, I'm sorry, John,
Go
is that
ahead.
if we do have somebody that wants to join, then they're out of luck.
Right. I guess the idea there is to create an alternate slot, so we would have 5 and an alternate, so you could maintain 6.
Well, they have 6 already.
I see, so we're actually removing someone from a
Well,
So
slot.
is one of those 6 from the community garden? 'Cause that's the best part, the single biggest charge, and I think I know there's a delegate from community gardens to AgCom. I'm not sure if they're actually a member or not.
I don't think this is probably urgent. Maybe, Kristen, did you already give them that feedback and they came
I
back
have
and
not,
said,
no,
okay.
no.
So maybe what we do is we say we recommend course A or course B and ask them to come back.
Well, I think they can't.
They can't meet on, and vote on it because they don't have a quorum necessarily.
Oh, I
So
see.
I think if we give them whatever they need, they can have a few meetings and decide where they want to go and always come back to
And
you.
they can, okay, that's a good idea. So would we propose 5 and 3?
5 members,
that's-
1 alternate, and a
One
quorum is
alternate.
3.
Yeah,
So a quorum would be 3.
okay.
Well,
So,
but again, the only challenge with that is that if they have somebody who wants to jump in, they have no room to take somebody. So maybe you do 5 with 2 alternates, and the quorum's still at 3, and that gives them 1 to grow without having to come back to us and ask to do this again.
Yeah, that'd be okay.
I think that's fine too. So would you like to make that motion?
I will make that motion, that we change the membership of the agricultural commission to a total of 7 members, 2 alternates, 5 voting members for a quorum of 3.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Andrea?
I,
I'm also an aye. Next up is board reports and updates. Board reports and updates tonight. Okay, don't see any. Town manager's report.
Great, so good news. We have 2 grants that we're looking for acceptance from. We received the Mass Cultural Council Fiscal 24 Local Cultural Council allocation in the amount of $10,600. And we also received an earmark from the Department of Conservation and Recreation to offset a portion of the cost to build a new playground at the Nabnasa Elementary School in the amount of $100,000. And I'd just like to thank Rep. Arcero's office related to that earmark. He was integral in assisting the town to get that offset.
I think that's the 3rd one he's been able to get us, so kudos to him.
Great, thank you much. You don't need any votes on this?
I do need a vote so
Okay.
I can sign the grant authorizations and send back to the state.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the grant authorizations as outlined in the agenda?
So moved.
And a second? All in favor? Andrea?
I,
Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. And correspondence. Any comments about correspondence? I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading of correspondence.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Andrea?
I,
Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
Andrea's not waiting. All in favor? Andrea?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Thank you, Westford. Have a good night.